So, yeah, this next one is one that we kind of need to address because it's another one that's kind of quietly doing the rounds. It's been a bit prominent in news circles recently. ARTEM VAKHITOV, as we mentioned, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, has been especially vocal on social media lately. He's officially the last man to beat ALEX PEREIRA on his exit from kickboxing, and there is a little bit of contention about that, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. And now he's looking to make a rapid rise, potentially in the same way that Alex did due to his prior history with Adesanya, except the roles are kind of reversed this time. And we kind of saw how that worked out for Alex. So you know a fair little bit about this lad as somebody who watches a lot of combat sports in general. But what chance do you give ARTEM to have the same meteoric rise in the sport?
I give him like a 1% chance. Not because of his skill. Not necessarily because of him. It's because when you look at him versus what Alex did, time is not on his side. It's just really what it comes down to. Time is not on his side. There was a similar situation, and I think you'll remember this, is when Joe Duffy came to the UFC. Joe Duffy was, at that point in time, the last person that beat Conor McGregor. And Joe Duffy came in. I saw him fight in person, and I was like, man, he might got a chance. You know, he could wrestle. He had hands. He was knocking people out. And the moment he lost, it was over. It was like, It was done. It was a done deal. And ARTEM would face the same thing. Would they allow him to be fast-tracked if he was knocking people out? Yes. But even with being fast-tracked, he, at this point, I think he has 3 fights. He's 2-1. The one loss was his first fight, and he had a dislocated elbow. So he's got 2 stoppage wins, but he would need to come, even if they allowed him to just jump right into the UFC, he would have to win probably 3 times in a very stacked middleweight division. So his first fight would be against somebody who's not ranked. If he starches them out, maybe he gets somebody that's ranked. That's them being generous. He gets somebody that's ranked. Who in the top 15 can he beat just out the gate like that? This is not a watered down division. And I'm not talking about the middleweight, but the light heavyweight. It's not that watered down. They would have to give him Anthony Smith.
Yeah.
Like, they would have to give him Anthony Smith. And even so, he might get taken down and get submitted. Like, I don't think it'll be that easy. I think that he's being generous. I think he's like 4 fights away, and probably 5. Alex is 37. You think he's going to wait for you to get 5 fights and then fight you? And you have little to no presence as being a worthy B-side to him? I just don't see it happening. If he does have a rise in the UFC, it'll be for reasons outside of Alex. And it'll take a lot longer for him to get there because he won't have the Alex hype and, you know, that confrontation pulling him along the same way that Alex did with Izzy. Izzy is a major portion of the reason that Alex was able to get up there, and then Alex had to do the work to get the championship. ARTEM's not going to get that.
I mean, like, I've seen this guy fight a fair bit, and talking from a technical standpoint, he is fairly technical. And both the fights that you had with Alex were fairly close. I mean, you could have called both fights either way. They were both very close fights. When he first started talking about making a foray into MMA, I was with you. I was very dismissive of it. I was like, I don't really give this guy much of a chance, because we saw it happen with, there was another fighter in, who was that guy who was 5-0 and recently came into the UFC, and he had a fight where he did reasonably well and then he lost. It was Kopylov he fought. I can't remember the guy's name. His name eludes me off the top of my head anyway, but he fought Kopylov in his last fight. You know, the one that Kopylov took down. He had also fought Alex Pereira.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd also fought Alex Pereira in kickboxing and was looking to do the same thing. So I was like, and we saw how that went. It's amounted to nothing. And obviously, what Alex has achieved in MMA is in such a short space has been so startling and unique that, like I said, when this guy was talking about doing the same thing, I've obviously dismissed it. The likelihood of that happening again is, at least on the surface, very, very unlikely. What's kind of piqued my interest a little bit, though, firstly, is that Alex has engaged with him. And it's not really like Alex to... Yeah, it's not really like Alex to come out and throw cold water and engage this way. So maybe he's a little bit threatened, I don't know, or a little bit annoyed by it. So he's already helped to push the flames or to stoke the flames a little bit more. Now, is he likely to have the same meteoric rise as Alex? I still think it is highly unlikely. However, there are two reasons that I'm kind of keeping a close eye on this. I know that he's late in his career, but firstly, those kickboxing guys, as we've seen with Alex, are just built kind of differently than even MMA guys are. Especially when they fight at that level. I mean, these dudes are used to fighting high-level competition on a regular basis. They're fighting 5, 6, 7 times a year. So they're used to being in the fire. Also, we're kind of witnessing a trend where fighters with a pure striking background are having real success within the MMA space. Like, we're not just talking about Alex Pereira. If we look at the current crop of champions now, most of them are champions that have striking as a base, and they found a way to kind of just negate the takedowns and get their way through fights in that way. The main reason why I think this may have a fairly decent chance of working is I think he's going to be given the chance to fast track his way into a title fight in a similar way than Alex did. I don't know if you're aware of this. He's already been booked to be on the Contender Series. So he is popping up at some point. I think when the Contender Series starts, he's going to be featured quite early on. I think his existing history, in the same way that Izzy played a big part in vaulting Alex into the spotlight, Alex is now that Izzy level guy in the UFC. So if this guy kind of comes out and lands a few like starching wins, he could feasibly be 2 or 3 of those away. If he keeps calling Alex Pereira out every time he starches somebody out, he could find himself in contention in what is a very piss weak division that Alex has already pretty much beaten the best contenders in. The dude is good, and you know his name ends in OV. You cannot take that out of consideration.
He is Russian.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Like, again, it's going to be very much dependent on him, but I wouldn't be surprised if the UFC gave him favorable matchups along the way, like avoided a few wrestlers here and there, especially if he goes to the Contender Series, for example. Starch is his first person out. I can see them bringing him in, maybe even giving him a top, a 10 to 15 ranked person. They tried to do it with, I can't remember the dude's name, but Kopilov seemed like a very big step up for him. I can see a path where it could happen, and with the way these kickboxing guys are, it wouldn't surprise me if he tried to take 2, 3, 4 fights in a short space of time. He could very feasibly have 4 fights in the space of a year, which is probably what it's going to take for him to get on Alex's doorstep.
That's what it would need to happen. It would have to be something like that. And then also, he has to hope that Alex retains the title. There's
that as well. Because as soon as Alex loses the title, the luster from that goes right out the window. Because nobody's going to want to see ARTEM versus Ankalaev. Or ARTEM versus Jamal Hill or whoever. There's nothing to that. It's very much contingent on him fast tracking himself by starching guys out as quickly as possible. And he's had knockout wins obviously along the way, but he does get a lot of decisions as well. So there's a lot to depend on there. But I think it's something that it's at least is worth keeping our eye on.
I agree. It is something to look at. Even though I think the chances of it actually occurring are very slim. It did happen once, and we've seen the results. So it is something to pay attention to, ever so slightly. If he goes out and starches whoever he's fighting on the Contender Series, then that needle starts to come up a little bit. So
It's going to be down to him doing it impressively. But what I'm saying is, I do think the UFC will give him the opportunity, and I do think they'll make it a bit easier on him. Just potentially.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I do agree with that.